Hey everybody, this is Atesh and I'm back with another episode of Making Modern Metal Production Essentials. In the first video of the series, we talked about double tracking and the use of center. And in this video, we're looking at two more techniques that I find useful. Let's go. What I mean by less is more is, say you have a bass guitar line and you wanted to make it a little fuller sounding in the lower end. So you add another bass line, like maybe a synth bass, by playing a different melody. That's not the best thing to do in a production because that has a higher chance of like messing up those frequencies. And it might turn into this like muddy thing that you might not like. Although there are some occasions where you can actually stack the same melody. Say you have a synth. Well, you can actually use the same take and use different synths, and that will create a fuller sound. But be careful of how you treat these things. Here's a little song called Mechanism I did in collaboration with Sturgis tones. And it's been some time and now I want to expand this, and as I'm expanding it, I'm trying new elements on it. Here's the part I'm working on now, which is the end of the tune. This is where I'm at now. So one thing I generally like is adding electronic elements into my songs, but really distorted and dirty sounds, more on the industrial side. When I was trying to add new elements, I came up with this, which is a sequencer. This is how it sounds. In context, it adds some texture and movement. Let's hear it with and without. So in the first part, as you can hear, it's kind of a question and answer type of structure. But in the very end, everything comes together and plays the same thing. So for the first part, keeping the sequencer on just one note sounds good. It just propels the song. It repeats the root note, tonic, if you will, which acts sort of like a pad and keep us suspended. But in the end part, I have this other synth that is playing the melody as well. So if I keep the sequencer on the same note, it just kind of turns everything into a mush. Not those two synth parts. If I solo them, we can hear them both, and it's kind of cool. Like this. But in context, you can't clearly hear the melody anymore. It's not as clear, but still, let's try. So instead of putting that line like that, I put the same melody on the sequencer, so it plays the melody, but it's still a sequencer. So it has the rhythm element going. But at the same time, it supports the melody, so we kind of get the best of both worlds. Let's see another example for the bass line. This is the part we'll talk about. In this example, I again have a sequencer, but this time it's much more of a fundamental element in the song. It's literally the driving force of the entire verse. Now, it doesn't have anything down where the bass is, and if you listen to it in solo, it doesn't sound as full as it can. Let's hear it.
When you hear this, you expect to hear a full bottom end. You want it to be as ballsy as possible. At least that's what I expect from this type of synth. So I went ahead and added the bass notes. For the sake of the argument, I'm going to do it in two ways. What I'm doing here is a pedal point for bass guitar. For the ones that don't know, pedal point is keeping one note in the bass part and changing the chords on top of that, so the chords are inversions. The idea is that the bass stays where it is and everything on top of that changes in terms of harmony. I'll talk more about this in the upcoming Making Modern Metal Composition Essentials episodes. So the first way we can go about it is to play the regular harmony with the sequencer. So it's going to play the root notes and shape basic chords. It's here in solo. But when you hear this inside the mix, you'll notice two things. First of all, the fundamental note is extra strong, which is not a big problem. You can solve it with some mixing techniques. But the second problem is when the chord changes. When the synth starts playing the second chord, which is the fourth degree in the scale, it kind of clashes with the bass guitar and loses all of its definition. To be able to hear that, I would need to turn it way up, and that still wouldn't give me the desired result in the low end. Also, because bass guitar loses some definition too. Let's hear it. This is because there's a limit to perceive harmonies clearly. If you're sitting by a piano or have a MIDI controller that you can play chords with a piano sound, try this. Take a simple 1-3-5 chord, say D, E, F, A, a basic D minor chord. When you play this up on the higher registers, you can clearly hear everything about this chord. Not so much in the lower registers. The lower you go down, the further these notes should be apart from each other. So instead of using thirds, you can use fifths, and if it's really low, then you can play the octaves down there and play the rest of the notes in the chord in the upper register. Okay, so now we know this, let's try it with the sequencer. Let's do the pedal point and not put anything down in the bass register other than the root note. The rest of the chord is still there. Not that it's a super rich chord, it's 2 notes at a given time. But combined with the bass and the guitars, that is plenty rich. And also, even though it has 2 notes going on each chord, you can clearly hear the intended chord, even when soloed. So technically it should work just fine. But let's see if it does. Here's the sequencer soloed. And here in context. Now that's a lot better, but it still has that low build-up, and it still makes the bass guitar lose some definition. Now I'll lose those notes and play one more time, but you'll notice that even though there's a big difference when soloed, meaning it's much fuller and more satisfying, in context it still hurts the bass guitar and muddies up the bass frequencies. We should also remember that there's also the kick in those frequencies, not only the bass guitar. Also, it doesn't feel that different when those bass notes are removed from the sequencer, so let's hear them back to back.
Number 4, prioritize your lines. Now, if you have a main melody that you want the full focus on, well, you can maybe stack some instruments on it. If it's a melody, then I usually double track it with something. I mean, it doesn't always have to be a guitar, it can be a synth. And I usually go with a synth to double the guitars. I think this creates a better sonic environment, in my opinion, and it adds a lot of color.
So here's a melody from my tune Hole in the Wall from the Cycle EP. As you'll see in a second, I didn't double track it with the guitar. I used the synth instead. And I just wanted to say that these are the official stems I got from Richardson, who did the mixing and mastering for the EP. It might sound a bit different than the EP version because I don't have the same stuff going on the master bus. First, let's see them one by one. First, the guitar line. Here's the synth line. Together they sound like this. And in the mix. Again from the same song, a little weirder one. Here the melody is actually just playing the rhythm exactly, but adding harmonies. And I wanted to make that line heard a bit more and increase the attack of it. Let's hear them in solo. First the guitar. And here's a weird synth to add some attack. Let's hear them together. And this is how they sound like in the mix. Actually, you can hear that weird quacking synth is boosting the kick as well.
You can also do this partly. You can take some of the melody and double that just one bit with a synth or a piano or electric piano, you name it. The rest is by itself, but you bring the attention to that part you want to focus on more.
Here's another piece from my EP. This one is called Flaw. And again, these are stems, not multi-tracks, so acoustic and electric piano are printed together, but you'll be able to hear what I'm talking about. Here's the guitar melody. And the electric piano that joins in just for 4 notes. You'll notice when the guitar changes, the electric piano keeps playing the same 4 notes. Let's hear them in the mix. And you can hear them together again once the other instruments stop.
That brings us to the end of the episode. Let's recap. We talked about using less melody lines in the same register, and we talked about how you can prioritize your lines. It would be fantastic if you could like this video and subscribe and share this video with your production buddies and your bandmates if you have. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Until next time.